What would you say to a tower defense game that only gives you one tower? Well, I say buckle up, it's good fun, because that's what CyberTD is all about. But it's not just having the singular tower at your disposal to try and hold off hordes of enemies, it's also a roguelike deck builder, because after each wave of enemies, your next upgrade is taken from the deck of cards that you've built into your deck. Your deck gets built throughout levelling up of XP so that you get more cards to play with, which then allows you to strategize to the end of the world. And it's here where the replayability and the depth and the real fun of CyberTD comes to the fore. In this game, you don't have to worry about tower placement necessarily, although you do have different versions of the game where your tower is placed in different parts of the map, or the way how the enemies come to you will be different. But what enemies come, how they come at you, are not always identically the same, but they're kind of based on variations of a theme, which allows the entire game to be online leaderboard based, so you can spot where your rank is against everyone else on screen at all times, which is always a good incentive. However, the real trick here is that your singular tower will unlock weapon slots over time, and you'll unlock different types of weapons by killing bosses, which happen every 10 waves. And so you'll start off with some blaster guns, but soon you'll unlock a missile, which has got greater length but bigger impact damage but is slower. Then you'll get lasers, which give continual damage and can range quite far, but they're not very powerful. Then you'll get other weapons that will kind of drop in after that, and it's up to you as to how you fill out your 5 slots. And you do that matching up against your deck of cards that you'll unlock every time you level up too, because some of those will be upgrades for specific weapons. Some of them might affect all of the weapons on your tower. It could be that it adds status effects or ailments to it. It's really up to you how you build out your deck. There's a couple of requirements for having a minimum amount of cards in of certain types, but what you put in there is entirely up to you, and how many you put in are entirely up to you too. So if you want to be very generous and put in all of the cards so that you've got loads of options, that's great. But then the likelihood and percentage of you drawing that deck card out at the right time at the right place for you is going to be much smaller. So it really incentivizes you to think strategically about how you want to build out your tower for the future. There is no definitive right or wrong way though, because the enemies as you go through the game start adding on different abilities that make you think about how you need to build out your tower over time. Initially, you'll just be thinking about damage and firepower, and so cards that do things like increase the damage of every weapon by 20% or 25% is fantastic, because it's just an infinite win, and you can see at the end of each wave what each card does to your stats in general, so that you can kind of make informed decisions about what the damage per second is for all of your weapons as you go along. However, some of the more rarer cards up the ante a bit. So it will say things like increase damage by 100% but reduce speed by 50%. And that might sound like an obvious net gain versus, say, increase speed of everything by 30%. And it will show that the DPS, damage per second, is bigger. But some of the enemies don't take well to just being killed by damage. It might be that previously you've upgraded a certain weapon to do extra damage to shields, for example. So actually, because shields need to be got rid of often quite quickly before they either replenish or they go into a cloaking status or something like that, speed is more important than overall damage. So you have to kind of factor that all into your brain. And it's very good at offering you out lots and lots of choices. Not so great always in being able to show you exactly whether or not you've done the right thing, and you'll always have that luck element there. But so long as you're fine with that, and you know that maybe some runs you will be onto a hiding, so you'll just be gathering XP in the meantime to unlock more cards and have more choices at hand, then I think you'll have a great time with CyberTD. Outside of the main gameplay loop, whenever you then unlock new cards, you can go into your deck and build out various different decks and have several to choose from. You can also load out your tower with up to 5 main weapons, and you can have 5 of all of the same type, or you can spread them all out. You also get separate like passive abilities to be able to slow down time, to boost up your like overdrive of your tower, for example, or to send out an EMP pulse, which normally puts everyone's shields down for a few seconds or drops their cloaking status or something like that. It's really, really helpful to think about how everything works in totality with each other. So as you build out your tower, you build out the appropriate deck. Easier said than done. Very good fun to have. I did find myself getting very frustrated on one very specific boss on level 40, where it fires a laser at you, and it didn't seem like whatever I was doing back quite often would really affect the boss, and it didn't really tell me why. So I did find throughout CyberTD in my time playing it, I'd end up in places where I'd be like, why is that happening? Because I wasn't getting the game's feedback for me to truly understand exactly why I wasn't being as successful here compared to, say, trouncing the previous 39 levels, for example. Outside of that, there's a couple of really interesting modes that you can play through. The first thing is that this game is not just single player, you can work in co-op. I've not had the chance to really play this because I got no friends, but you have the ability to not just work cooperatively and fight off waves of enemies together, but there is a versus mode, which reminds me of some great games that I've played elsewhere in the TD genre, where you'll basically be fighting off waves of enemies side by side to see who can do best. You're not sending enemies to each other, for example. It's like a side-by-side battle. There are weekly challenges available too. And then there's also a virus mode, which I found really interesting, because what it did was whenever you got to the upgrades screen after each wave, some upgrades are marked as viruses, and they increase your like detection rating. And if you choose 5 marked red virus cards in a row, or like over time, the next upgrade that you get, whatever it says is a positive, will actually take things away from you. So you're no longer just constantly making things better. You're then tactically having to work out what you're going to make things worse for the next round on. And it was a really cool spin on the idea, and I really enjoyed that. The other thing kind of hidden in the game is that there's lots of different layouts for you to try. So there's the initial kind of curve one where all of the enemies kind of go around you, and that's like the basic mode. There's another one where it puts you right, and that kind of puts you in the centre of the map, I should say. But there's also a mode where it puts you right next to the core that you're defending. There's another one where there's no curves, it's just a giant straight line, and so things arrive thick and fast. So you have to make sure that you've got like priority on speed and range over damage sometimes to survive that longer. That goes back to that whole, do I prioritise range, speed, damage, or like status ailments, because that can be quite handy for some of those too. Yeah, and again, all of those have bespoke custom online ranking, and you can see very clearly on the top right hand side as you're moving up close to the next ranked player when you're going to overtake them, and you can kind of see where people get stuck and die together, which I thought was quite funny on the online leaderboards. For full disclosure, I haven't completed the game, but it doesn't look like anyone has at the moment, because I'm near the top of most of the leaderboards, if not at the top of some of them. And so I feel like I know this game probably better than most people out there at the moment for launch, and can happily say that so long as you don't mind a little bit of RNG with obviously the decks producing random upgrades to you, but that you heavily enjoy the strategic element of working out how to build your tower in certain directions to deal with whatever's being thrown in your way, I think you would enjoy CyberTD. Yes, it has some problems with telling you exactly what's going on the map, and yes, some of the UI is a little bit clunky, particularly on the main menus to kind of wander around stuff, but they're tiny niggles in what is a really engrossing, moreish and addictive experience that I give 2 hearty thumbs up to. Written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com this weekend. Any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I look forward to seeing you all bump me down the leaderboard when it releases today. Take care. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/HigherPlaneNetwork. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.